Iran is a country where lashings are required against women dubbed immodest, where stoning of women is still permitted, and has, if you can believe this, Iran has now been elected by none other than the United Nations to a commission that conducts reviews of women's rights. Is this political hypocrisy at its lowest point? Republican Congressman Thaddeus McCotter joins us. Congressman, how could Iran now have been granted this position to be on a commission to investigate countries that may be violating women's rights? How did it happen?
Well, it happens from the premise that the UN is a morally relative institution which doesn't take these things into account. That's how an Iran can get elected to sit as a predator monitoring the prey, in a sense, Allison, on the UN Commission on the Status of Women. So what happens is, because you have more nations that are tyrannical and not free in the United Nations than you do free nations, you get outvoted, the norms become perverted, and you see oppressive regimes like Iran wind up in places where they should be being investigated rather than sitting in judgment.
Was there a vote that took place? Could the U.S. possibly have objected to Iran getting this position?
No, as Fox News has reported, they've not had an opportunity to object, but they could have asked for a vote. What happens is they come out of regions. There are certain numbers of places allotted, countries allotted by region. What the problem is there's no moral standard by which countries can or cannot come out of these regions. The United States, which had been effective in keeping them off the UN Human Rights Commission, which would have been an abomination in and of itself, unfortunately either was unaware of Iran trying to angle for this, was ineffective in preventing them from getting on there, or acquiesced in it.
So what's the bottom line here? What does this tell us about the UN going forward?
Well, as I said in my statement, it shows us that the UN is a morally rancid institution that constitutes a global Tammany Hall. From the American perspective, what we see is not Franklin Roosevelt's dream. What we see is a perversion of it by which the American taxpayers are asked to pay through the nose to get kicked in the teeth, and it sends messages such as Iran's election to this commission. Could you imagine being the family of Neda Sultan or Taraneh Mousavi, women who were killed in the streets of Tehran and Iran by this regime? Can you imagine the message this sends from an institution that was designed to help advance liberty and human rights throughout the world?
Let's try to somehow glean some sort of positive spin here, if that's possible. Is there any way that by being a part of this commission, Iran will suddenly become more sensitive to what they've been doing to women now for decades?
The jackal will not change its nature. This regime is barbarous. It denies its own people's thirst for liberty and their aspirations for a better life. The only good thing that will come out of this is it will tell women throughout the world just how low the UN has sunk.
Maybe I can read for our audience. We do have a letter from women's rights activists to the UN. It says here, women lack the ability to choose their husbands, have no independent right to education after marriage, no right to divorce. They are arrested, beaten, and imprisoned for peacefully seeking change of such laws. While the Iranian women's rights movement has inspired equality activists around the world, the Iranian government has no basic belief in gender equality. Your last word on this, Congressman McCotter?
That was well said. I'll let them have the last word.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us this morning to bring light to this.
Thank you.
All right.